Story 1. Oh, I'm just taking a hit of heroin. I'll be back to bed in a few minutes. While sitting on my bathroom floor with a needle in her arm. She was in medical school and is now a doctor, somehow. Story 2. I was expressing to a friend that I wanted to quit my desk job and pursue a job in the trades. She said loudly in front of our friend that I could never do that because I'm not good with my hands. The lack of support and how comfortable she was putting me down in front of my friend really made me realize it wasn't a good match. We broke up not long after that, and I'm now a welder. Story 3. Just last night, she drunk texted me. You are an amazing man and father. I feel like I need a man who can take care of me financially. I'm alone. I was lying there next to her. Story 4. I have cheated in every relationship I have ever been in. Probably half a dozen relationships over a 10-year span. But it is different with you. I genuinely love you. Our relationship is much better, stronger. I am fulfilled and would never cheat. Narrator. That was not the case. Story 5. When she said, I am never getting married again. We were both divorced with kids. We weren't even talking about marriage, and she walked into the house one day and just said it. Story 6. Earlier that day, she told me she wasn't feeling well, so I went to Blockbuster and grabbed Ferris Bueller's Day Off to watch alone that night. She must have been feeling a little better because she was walking into Blockbuster as I was leaving and had basically draped herself around her old boyfriend who was home from college for the weekend. I attempted an awkward wave, but I was genuinely happy to see that my nights and weekends had magically cleared up. Story 7. I figured out the reason I drove us everywhere was that she had a court-ordered breathalyzer checker installed on her car due to her second driving under the influence conviction. Instantly, the switch flipped in my brain. She went from a potential wife candidate to a casual fling that I should definitely not stay with for long. Story 8. I really wanted it to be her so badly, but talking about another guy, I just dated him so I would have a place to stay. I know that sounds bad. I don't drink. I'll still do cocaine or something. I still party, but drinking makes me mean. Talking about her speaker. I stole it from insert baby daddy's name here. Gets a call from baby daddy. I'm with a friend. Then flirting with guys on her Facebook comments while simultaneously complaining about me when at the time I hadn't done anything wrong at all. Story 9. We had an argument. We had many arguments and she always manipulated them just right so that, at best, nobody was at fault. But this one, I had her dead to rights that she was wrong and I was right, and what she was trying to claim never happened. Instead of saying sorry and admitting defeat, she walked off and dropped it entirely. Later, when I asked for an apology, she said, I don't apologize. It's over, that's it. Meanwhile, she would demand apologies whenever I did something wrong, or she was convinced that I had, and I didn't have any way to defend myself, and then I would have to make it up to her. I'm not legally obligating myself to that. Story 10. That her younger brother was actually the son of her older sister's boyfriend. I thought her mother was too friendly, but that confirmed it. A great girlfriend, but I was never going to live anywhere near her bats hit crazy family. Story 11. You know I will not cheat on you, but if I wanted to, you would never know. She was young and very attractive, so I let it go at first. But it always lingered in the back of my mind. I never really trusted her again. Story 12. It was maybe the third or fourth date and we were talking about career ambitions and future plans. She very casually made it clear that despite having a degree and being an early career professional, she had no intention of working once she got married and expected her man to provide for her. I'm sure she found what she was looking for. She was very pretty, but that wasn't what I wanted in a relationship. Story 13. Yelled at waitstaff and resort staff about things they had no control over. If you can't hold it together when your mashed potatoes are a little salty, your hotel air conditioning isn't freezing cold but is working, or an excursion leader won't let you play your music, how do you expect to raise children with good souls? Nightmare. Story 14. She did not want to go pick up his father from his work after he called asking her. It was very late and pouring rain. He gave her his car so she could go to university to study full-time while he paid for everything. I was there with her, and I knew she had time to go pick him up. She was just being inconsiderate. Story 15. I mean, yeah, I don't know them, so obviously if I drove past a house on fire, I wouldn't do anything. This was in the context that one night on a back road, she and I were just cruising. There was a big bonfire off the road, but at the angle it was situated, I thought it was a house. Since there was no fire department or anything, I immediately turned around to get a better look. She was extremely confused and mentioned that even though there was nobody outside or no fire department or anything, she wouldn't have even given it a second thought that there could have possibly been people, pets, etc. in the house. Story 16. We won't be together if we don't have kids. We both wanted kids, but if for some reason we couldn't have kids, I needed to know we would cope with the problem together. Story 17. The one that stands out the most is after I did some silly dance, and I jokingly said, "Yep, you're stuck with me the rest of your life." And she just didn't respond at all. Two things she said: "I don't think there is room for that espresso machine," and "I don't think an external office would work." We were long distance and living 5 hours apart, though I could work remotely and we could spend a month or so at each other's home. She was annoyed at me working from home or bringing anything that would take any room in her home. It should have been a clear sign that I just didn't have a place in her life anymore. A 5-year relationship ended a couple of months after all of these events. Story 18. I had one tell me that I needed to go to college, which isn't a bad thing. The problem was, at the time, I was a supervisor for a huge company and made really good money. It was the fact that I wore jeans instead of khakis to work that really bothered her. She eventually told me that it was embarrassing when she talked to her friends about it and that all her friends' husbands had degrees. Dodged a bullet not marrying that one. Story 19. My goal is to be a stay-at-home wife with a rich husband. This was just a person I was casually seeing at the time, but I knew it wouldn't get past that. Ambition is sexy. Story 20. Oh, it wasn't what she said. It was her tattoo on the back of her neck that said, "Made in England." Felt like I was having sex with the entirety of the English Defense League. Story 21. During the initial getting to know you phase, her response to me asking her what her favorite book is was, "I don't read." It turns out she had zero intellectual curiosity about almost everything. No thanks. Story 22. Started dating. She knew about my kids from the first messages we exchanged. She was okay with that, but she didn't have any of her own, even though she was willing to accept that I did and that I would actively be a parent for mine. We had a very good start to things in general after both of us got accustomed to a few cultural differences. A bit further in, she started talking about how I spent too much time on the kids and how I should look into boarding school for them instead. There were a few other things that started to come up around this point as well, but this was where it started to fall apart for me, and it only really lasted a couple of months after that. We were able to part as friends, and while I don't regret the time I spent getting to know her, it was a sad realization that neither of us could truly be what the other needed in a partner. Story 23. Why do you want to know my parents' names? You are never going to meet them. I cannot see myself being married. Ever. I should have broken it off before I fell too deep. It has been a minute. I am moving on. Hopefully, the next person is better. Story 24. She owned her own house, as her parents were prominent landlords in the area, and she wanted me to move in. I figured we would integrate our styles in some way. Nope. She explained to me how I would be able to finish the basement and use it for my things so that when guests come over, they don't see it. I then realized that all the men in the family had man caves, and this was the norm, not the exception. I ended our 2-year relationship over this. I met my wife 2 months later, and our house is a blend of our interests with everyone's interests valued. Story 25. 7-year relationship, engaged for 1 year. During sex, I tried a slight variation of missionary, nothing crazy at all. She said she doesn't bend that way, and we moved back into the regular position. Then she looks me in the eye and says, "You know it's only going to get worse from here. We're 34. Instant attraction loss." 7 months later, and I'm now with a woman where it is most certainly not getting worse from here. Story 26. I was trying to sign a baby mama contract with my ex and have a child for him with the guarantee that he would maintain my lifestyle. The details she gave me about the proposed contract were all monetary. Guaranteed amount of family vacation time, monthly allowance, bills covered, and an open relationship where she wouldn't sleep with anyone else but, in a sense, be free to emotionally cheat. Couldn't believe such an amazing woman was so mentally tainted. Still kills me to think about her, but it is difficult to comprehend. Story 27. I asked her why she thought I was dating her. She instantly said, "Because you can't get anyone else." I don't know whether she was insulting me or herself, but that's not something I'll ever forget. Story 28. I was 22, and I knew she wasn't the one when she mentioned her ex-boyfriend, the guy from high school everyone thought she was going to marry, had been in town for about a week. Coincidentally, I glanced down and saw her engagement ring on the end table while she was telling me about her day. That was some 30 years ago, so I don't remember if I took the ring back that day or a couple of days later. If you're not going to wear the ring or tell him you're engaged, why should I be in this relationship? I moved to another state within a month and began a new program at a different school that fall. Story 29. This was a terrible relationship, honestly should have been a lot that made me run away. But when she got into an argument and insulted me for saying drinking recycled water is ultimately fine, which led to her claiming that she doesn't believe dinosaurs exist because she doesn't believe everything she reads in books. Yeah, I finally asked myself, what am I doing in this relationship? And pretty much started working my way out. Story 30. We had spent the whole day together on what was something like our fifth date, and I was developing strong feelings for her. We passed by a guy she knew, and she was very enthusiastic and waved hi, but he just kept walking. I asked her who he was, and she said she just sees him casually for sex and they're not anything serious. It gave off a vibe like she actually liked him, but he didn't like her, and she was convincing herself that she wasn't just being used. I lost all respect for her, and she tried to make moves on me later and I got out. Story 31. She mentioned how she does not believe in marriage. I said, "Cool, me neither." 10 years later, we have a daughter together now and are still not married because it is not needed at all, as we have a common law marriage. Story 32. We had a nice date, went back to her place, and it seemed like things were going to get intimate soon. When I asked her about her roommates, she dropped a hard R. And I lost every bit of interest imaginable. Story 33. I want us to read religious book together so I, and we, can feel closer to religious entity. It was never really my thing, and at that moment I knew that it would only get worse if I continued to refuse. Story 34. Stop being so nice to me, she said when I took off my coat, so she could sit on it on a rocky beach. She was genuinely upset. She was too used to abuse and roughness to accept true love and giving without always being suspicious and skeptical. After a year of this, I stopped being nice to her. Edit to clarify, I broke up with her. Story 35. I waited on this girl for a year and a half in university. I was abroad and she was staying at my alma mater. We talked about dating before I went abroad, but she didn't want a long-distance relationship, which is fair. I came back with a girlfriend, but it didn't last because of distance. I waited some months for the breakup to heal, then asked this girl out, and she said yes enthusiastically. We could talk for hours and had a really nice date. I saw fireworks when I kissed her. I asked about her future plans, and she told me she didn't want kids at all and criticized me for wanting any. I respected her opinion, and we gradually stopped talking to each other. Story 36. We were just hanging out, and she took her phone out and scrolled through her social media until she said, "He's such a softie," followed by a giggle. She was referring to a mutual friend who I and a bunch of other friends know is a narcissist and a liar. Her not being able to read a person was a red flag for me. He somehow convinced her that he's a compassionate person who can't hurt anyone and is an animal lover. Still, with hope, I stayed with her until she suddenly cut off all communication with me. A few months later, I learned that she was with that same narcissistic friend. They deserve each other and I dodged a bullet there. Good riddance. Story 37. Maybe when you get an actual grown-up job like my sister's husband has. Meanwhile, he made $20 an hour less than me, and his benefits were terrible. Yeah, I'll pass. Story 38. When I took her to one of those creative restaurants, she hated every single dish. I'm an adventurous eater who likes new and unusual flavors. I want to constantly explore new things and have new experiences. Just using chips as an example, I would go for flavors like wasabi squid, mango caviar, or prosciutto melon. She was the kind who would rather have barbecue chips all her life. Obviously, it wasn't going to work out. I could imagine most of our meals would be a chore. Either she doesn't enjoy the place I take her, or I'm forced to follow her to something I don't enjoy. Story 39, we went to a science museum on a date and, looking around at the school children, she casually mentioned that kids were annoying and she did not understand why people had them. We had a couple more dates and great sex, but the relationship petered out from there. Story 40, she did not like how she looked and never wanted to be in photos with me. We dated 5 years and I do not think we ever took a single photo together. I also only met her parents once in that time frame, even though they were just a few hours away.